Well, thank you everybody for joining us. This is Good Elephant's third webinar in our new Tools for Teachers series. And today we have my wonderful mom, Wendy, right? And she is the founder of her nonprofit called MeWe&Us. And so I'll let her tell us a little bit about her and about MeWe&Us, and then she's going to talk today about how to plan your class schedule in alignment with higher consciousness. So understanding the energies of the different days of the week and all of that good stuff. So thanks for being here.
Thanks, Allie. It's wonderful to be here and to share all this information with everyone. I'll start with telling a little bit about myself. I have a degree in industrial design, and I worked 20 years as a product designer. And then I did fine arts for a while, and now I started this nonprofit called MeWe&Us. The catalyst for starting this nonprofit was I had a chronic illness for 36 years, and I went through a spiritual awakening and then a self-intuitive healing process, and I no longer have lupus. And so now I have a broader understanding of the vibrational dynamics of consciousness and the significance of healing and how all that works. And so to share that with everyone, that's why I started my website. And I created tools that help people understand their experiences from a holographic perspective, because what I've learned is that the holographic perspective is dimensional. And when we start to understand ourselves as a dimensional, energetic, vibrational being, that's when healing happens, and that's when we are more in tune with consciousness and in alignment with our purpose. So what I'm going to do is I have some visuals, so I'm going to share my screen. So this is aligning your class with higher consciousness. There's actually a lot more to creating and teaching according to time and space than a lot of people understand or are aware of. So with this particular time I'd like to talk about the two factors, the type of class and when you offer your class. Those are very important. But what I'd like to do is step out of the box of what you normally consider or think of, and let's think of it holographically, and let's think of it as, you know, what's really involved in aligning yourself with the dynamics and the vibrations of consciousness. So I came up with some self-inquiry questions. The first one, when you're doing your type of class, is the energy of your class creative or receptive? What aspects of the self are you unfolding? What celestial energy influence are you collaborating with during the class? And these are very holographic questions. And what that does is it not only, it opens you up, and it also opens up higher consciousness for you to align and have that energy part of your class. And also the second thing is when you to offer your class, what is the best day to teach your class? So those are the questions that we're going to be answering in the next half an hour. So when I do like a presentation like this, I'm bringing a lot of different information together and compiling it. So that's what holographic information is. It's a unified perspective, where traditionally we go and look at the moon cycles and maybe Vedic astrology and astrology yoga. But what I'm going to do in these diagrams I'm showing you is I'm bringing all those things together so we have a bigger, complete picture dimensionally of what's happening. So these are 4 books that I use regularly. And one of them is the moon cycles, astrology, yoga, and then Western astrology, but from the point of the view of the soul, a very spiritual perspective, and then yoga and Vedic astrology. So that's where most of the information is coming from. So I put together from that information, I put together this diagram. And what it has is it has 4 columns. And one of the columns is the weekdays. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the weekdays in relationship to like the good elephant categories and the dynamic impulses of consciousness and also the celestial influences, because all of these things are always underlying what we're doing. And most of the time we make decisions that don't incorporate this vibrational energy. And so when you're creating a new class, it's really great to at least be aware of the different aspects that are going, the different vibrations going on, and then to help with that awareness, then you can really pick the time of the class and the type of class and get everything aligned. So you're not working against consciousness, you're actually working with consciousness. So the first one we're going to look at is the good elephant categories. Now, I've had slight influence on my daughter because she actually created the categories according to the aspects of the self, which is great because that when a teacher goes in and starts to create a class, they're automatically going to have to choose one of these categories. And that really starts the alignment to happen. So when you choose the category, if you just take the next steps with it, I think everything would come into alignment. So what we have here, we have movement. We have the first category is move, second is restore, gather, and learn. So, and these have a practical expression to them that I've put next to it here: body and movement, and breath and mudras, sound, and meditation. So move is really a category that's attuning the body, attuning to our physicalness. And then restore is the energetic flow, which has to do with the chakras and it has to do with Gaia and the earth. And then we have gather, which is relationships and rhythm and vibration. And then we have learn, which is discipline, focus, and transformation. So those are just a general overview of what the good elephant categories are. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the holographic perspective that goes along with this. So these are the 5 aspects of the self, and they're in a circular configuration because that's really what holographic perspective is. And what we have is the physical, spiritual, emotional, and mental aspects. And then in the middle, we have the existential aspect. And as human beings, this is truly all encompassing of our experience of like a body and being in this reality. We are constantly experiencing these 4, 5 aspects. And what is happening is that we are unfolding the 4 aspects, which actually lets us experience and understand and know the existential aspect of ourself, which is our true higher self. So this process of unfolding is always trying to happen. And when we come into alignment with consciousness, we are working with it. So we're unfolding the aspects of ourself and we're learning about our true higher self, the existential aspect of ourself. So if we take the good elephant categories, you can see how they line up with the 4 aspects in the 5th aspect of unfoldment. We have move, which is associated with physical, restore, which is associated with spiritual, gather, which is associated with emotional, and learn, which is associated with the mental aspect. And so good elephant is starting at the very beginning with aligning with those 4 aspects, which is really awesome. So that the classes as a whole, as all the good elephant classes, are working together with consciousness. And they, in their own way, are going to be unfolding that existential aspect of all the people who participate so that they learn and know their true and higher self. So we have another aspect that's always influencing us, and that's the primary impulses of consciousness. And this is this column on the left here. And so the primary impulses, a lot of people understand them as the yin and yang symbol that we see a lot. And what is happening with yin and yang is that there's a creative impulse, which is outward movement of energy. And then there's a receptive impulse, which is inward refinement of energy. And these two dynamics, these two impulses are constantly working to keep a balance within consciousness. And so a lot of times, people become out of balance and they have a lot of outward movement, but they're not allowing that receptive impulse to happen where they're calmer and more refined, and they sit and let the outward movement come into a productive form. So when you put good elephant categories and you apply those impulses to it, you can see how the physical and spiritual aspect, which is move and restore of the good elephant categories, are the creative impulse. And then the emotional and mental, which is gather and learn, is the receptive impulse. So you have this, the way good elephant is set up, you have this natural creative impulse and you also have the receptive impulse going on. And you can see how we have the categories here, and then over here I've put receptive and creative, and you can see how they start to line up and how everything is starting to work. So our next category is time, which is the weekdays. This is very much space. This is spatial relationship, and this is really time. So what I'm going to start to talk about is how each day and how the week as a whole correlates with those spatial aspects of ourself, because everything in consciousness is always working together and trying to come together in alignment. So the days of the week are also time in this way is unfolding that existential aspect of ourself. Every week and every day of the week works together with the aspects of ourself to unfold it so that we learn more about our true and higher self. So Monday is in alignment with physical, but Tuesday is a transitional day where it spans both physical and spiritual. Wednesday is spiritual. Thursday is a very large transitional day because it's not only going between the spiritual and emotional aspect, it's also this whole creative aspect is now transitioning into the receptive impulse. So it's the creative impulse transitioning into the receptive impulse. So Thursday is a very important day. Friday is associated with the emotional, which is gather, and Saturday is another traditional day, and then Sunday is associated with the mental aspect. So it's all a process of unfolding. So we looked at time. Okay, we looked at time, and now we're going to look at celestial influence. So celestial influence is very much associated with time and the days of the week. As you can see, Monday is Moon, Tuesday's Mars, Wednesday's Mercury, Thursday's Jupiter, Friday's Venus, Saturday's Saturn, and Sunday's Sun. See, a very long time ago, the days of the weeks were actually named according to those planetary associations. And so there's a direct correlation. And a lot of times we just go through our week without understanding the significance of Monday and the significance of Tuesday. And what it does when we start to bring this into our awareness, it creates a dimensional experience of humanness, because there's so much creative meaning going on. And a lot of times it's lost because we're just not aware of it. So if you look at our solar system is creating human consciousness. Each planet has a significant purpose, and it's a vibrational entity that is influencing us on all different levels. So it's really fun to start to learn, okay, let's look at the solar system not just as these physical planets, but also the vibration that they carry and their significance and purpose, and how what part they play in creating human consciousness, and also what part they play in the unfoldment of um, our higher self and how that works, because each planet and the sun and the moon play a significant part in that unfoldment. So here's a holographic diagram where we've taken time, which are the days of the week, and we've correlated them with the aspects of the self and then the categories of good elephant. And now we have the celestial correlations in here too, with Monday and the moon. So you can see how as we move through the week, we go through the creative impulse, we get to Thursday, and then it transitions over and we start the receptive impulse, and then we get back to Sunday and we start the cycle over again. So these celestial influences, I've put some just major key words with them just to give them their characteristic and qualities without taking up a whole page, which you could go on and on about it. So like Monday is really a reflection and awareness. And then Tuesday is will and physicalness, which is associated with Mars, which a lot of people understand that. And a lot of classes are taught specifically with will and physicalness, like aerobics classes and those kinds of classes. Wednesday is Mercury, and that's regulation and movement of energy. The spiritual aspect of us has to do with the life force energy that comes through us and is constantly moving between higher consciousness and Gaia, and it's replenishing us all the time. So Thursday, this day that I said is a very big transitional day, Jupiter has to do with expansion and the existential aspect of ourselves. When we change from that creative to that receptive impulse, there's a lot that happens there, and it has to do with behavior and spirituality. So classes taught on Thursday should be very expansive and should be all encompassing of maybe all 4 aspects of the self. And that might have to do with the body and the breath and sound and meditation. So Friday is Venus, which is emotional, and that has to do with union with the divine. And it's very much a collective, I always think of it as like a huge hug on Friday. So then we have Saturn. Saturn has a little different temperament to it. It's discipline and contraction. So you go from Friday, that's this soft and fuzzy day, and then you kind of move into Saturn, which is more about discipline and contraction and, picking up all the loose ends that have happened during the week. And then Sunday is associated with the sun, which is concentration and illumination. So Sunday is all about that direct guidance and the direct warmth of the sun, which is the fire and the spirit. And what happens on Sunday is a lot of assimilation. What we expanded within our consciousness, the whole week, we bring together on Sunday. So it's a quieter day. It's more of a reflection and concentration. So that gives you an overview of kind of the holographic view of a week and all the few dynamics that I decided to share today, because there's many of them, and those I kind of picked out. So what we're going to do is look at that diagram now and start to look at these questions. How do we answer those questions? So what I've done is I've taken the diagram, and what we're first going to do is the energy of your class creative or receptive? Are you teaching outward movement? Are you teaching a refined, productive, inward energy? And we're going to look at the days of the week with the overall creative and receptive energies. So the first part of the week, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, is very creative. It's very much an outward energy. Thursday is that transitional day. And then we have Friday, Saturday, and Sunday are receptive. So when you're considering starting a new class, the first thing to really contemplate is, do you want to do a receptive class or do you want to do a creative class? And then pick the day of the week that corresponds with that. A lot of times, some restorative classes are set on Tuesday. And right there, you're really conflicting with the unfoldment of consciousness during the week. So it's just one thing to keep in mind. You know, maybe the first thing you consider is it a creative class? Is it like a lot of movement, maybe some jazzy music with it? Or is it more receptive and is it quiet? And then really pick, you know, those days of the week that correspond with that. So then we have a subtler sets of impulses that correspond with the week. And these have to do more with the aspects of the self. So creatively, the move category is a creative impulse. The restore category is a receptive. Gather is creative again. And then learn is receptive. So you can see how that affects, that kind of associates with the weekdays. So you have kind of Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday are strong impulse days. Whereas then you have Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday as transitional days. Now, if you notice on this diagram, I put morning and afternoon because really Tuesday, these transitional days, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, the morning goes with move category and the afternoon kind of really goes with restore. I always it's kind of fun to look at the weekend. You know, I worked full-time jobs and Friday came around and pretty much Friday afternoon, not much work got done. Everybody started talking and socializing. And I feel like that's what like Friday afternoon happy hours are. Everybody's starting to move into that really gather, you know, dynamic or vibration. And then that carries over into Saturday morning. And then Saturday, as the afternoon comes, we start going into more of a receptive impulse, which is learn, and then we prepare ourselves for Sunday. So that gives you, you know, consciousness has nested boxes. So the impulses, you know, we have a broader category of the impulses, but then we have these more subtle nested boxes, which are in alignment with those categories of good elephant. So when is the energy of your class creative or receptive? I mean, you can get a little more detailed with that, and you can really look at those days of the week and really decide, you know, if you're going to pick move or you're going to pick gather, you know, how does that affect the dynamics of what mass consciousness is doing too? So what aspects of the self are you unfolding during your class? This has to do with the categories again. And it's really about looking at the day that's really aligned with that. And then understanding, like I said before, with these transitional days. You know, what aspect, is it the physical, the spiritual, the emotional, or the mental? So when you start to design your class, you know, really keep that in mind, that that's the aspect of the self that you're focusing on. That's really what you're trying to bring forth on that day. Then we have the celestial influence. What celestial energy influence are you collaborating with during the class? This is very important. You know, at the very beginning of the class, you might recognize what that celestial association is and maybe have some kind of quote or something that really ties that in, because when you open the class up to that celestial influence, you're bringing all that power and vibration into the class and into all of your students. So you can do research, you can look at astrology books and learn more about the moon or Mars or Mercury. Everybody has a certain planet that they resonate with. And if you learn more about that and you figure out what you resonate with, and then you plan your class on the day that's associated with that, huge amount of power coming through you. You're collaborating with that vibration. So what is the best day to teach your class? What I've done is given you this holographic perspective, where with a holographic perspective, you can come at it any way, any angle you would like. So it's just opening your awareness to all the different influences that have to do with each day, and then bringing it all together in your own unique expression. So these aren't hard and fast rules. They are just something to consider and contemplate. And it's really about feeling what is right. You know, when you sit down and are thinking about, okay, what kind of class I want to teach, you know, throw around some of this and see what feels right to you. So here's a complete holographic diagram that shows exactly what I went through. And it has kind of the receptive and the creative, you know, top and bottom to it. So you can study this and use it. So Good Elephant is going to post both of these diagrams as a PDF on the web page, correct, Allie?
Yep, it's up on the website. Tools. It's under the teachers tab under tools for teachers. You can download the PDF.
And so if you would like more information, deeper explanation, you can find me at MeWe&Us.org. And I'm going to do a part 2 to this, which will talk more in depth about the moon cycles, because we can take what we just learned in those diagrams and then really go to the next level of the moon cycles, which is 4 weeks cycles that happen.
Cool. Well, thank you. Thanks for sharing.
Does anybody have a question?
You can here, let me just since we have you guys, Betty and Eric, I'll just add you here. So if you want to unmute yourself, you can talk too. So how, I have a question. How would you, what's a good like test to see if your class is going to be a receptive or a creative energy? Just basics.
Well, a creative class is very much outward movement, so it has a lot of activity. And if you're using music with it, it would have a faster beat to it. And it's still all about, the creative impulse is still all about attunement, but it's attunement in a more dynamic way. Whereas a restorative class, the receptive impulse is very much about quieting the self down and being calm and slowing, you know, the mind and getting the mind to be relaxed and being very reflective on thoughts and, you know, not jazzing them up, but actually slowing everything down. So that's the very general idea of it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then, like, what would be the difference? Because we have these words like spiritual, emotional. I guess my biggest question is the difference between those two for people. What is the difference, would you say, between a spiritual energy for a class and an emotional energy?
Emotional energy has to do with feeling. It has to do with becoming attuned with how you feel in the moment. So a lot of times you can combine, postures, but the postures in like yoga would be more reflective postures, not so much like the warrior pose, but maybe something that's a still posture. We have correlations to the postures and how they associate with the different aspects of the self. So emotional is more about how you feel, and spiritual is really about the awareness of the energy moving through your body. So they're both kind of feelings, but one is definite movement and one is more a psychological feeling, and it's more the heart feeling of what's going on. But that spiritual feeling is has to do with the chakras and opening up the chakras and feeling that alignment between Gaia and higher consciousness, and how that unfolds and how that's a beautiful umbrella. And so a lot of times a class that has to do with spiritual energy has a certain type of meditation that brings your awareness to the different chakras and then opening them up and then feeling that flow of energy.
Cool. And we have a question from Betty. Would it be a good idea to advertise your class with these descriptions? To use these words or this language when you're talking about your class to people?
Oh, definitely. I think it's huge to advertise a class and say, hey, we're having a Friday class that has to do with Venus, and then describe those dynamics and those vibrations of Venus, and then to say, okay, this is how we're going to align with that. We're going to do these postures, and then we're going to use this music, and so basically a Venus class would be very much associated with sound and music and gathering. It might be even a Venus class would be partner yoga, and because it's all about relationships, and it's also about the relationship with vibration, which is sound, music, singing bowls, gong, immersion, all of those would be that. So yes, I think that subconsciously when you use these terms and you start to speaking this language, you're going to subconsciously connect with other people. So one of the things I really didn't talk about, Allie, is that when you're in alignment with all of consciousness and this unfolding and all these dynamics and vibration, it makes a difference in the attendance of your class. Because a lot of times a class is started and it doesn't take into these considerations, and then you might get a few people to start with, but it doesn't continue. We have found through different classes that Good Elephant has done, when they are aligned, there's a consistent attendance to it, because everything, once you go once, you feel that unfoldment, and then you want to go again, and then you want to go again. And so I think once Good Elephant gets multiple classes started in alignment, people might be going to, the ones that you start unfolding the physical, and then you unfold the spiritual, and then you unfold the emotional. And so you find the class that's the aspect of the self that you really need to unfold at this time.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, there's a lot of examples that I can think of. Just in Good Elephant, like the history of our most successful classes, like we have an actual class called Moon Day Monday.
And yes, Moon Day Monday. Yep.
Yeah, and it works perfectly. And then there's a lot of yin and so we have a yin class and a yoga nidra class that are both on Wednesday nights, and that seems to work really good for people too, which that's a part of the big creative box, but the receptive smaller box. So I think it still works because yin is actually different from restorative yoga, where restorative you're just like blah, and you're just letting everything go. But yin is an actual, you're concentrating, you're practicing while you're doing some more receptive feeling poses. So that makes sense too. And then usually the ecstatic dance, everywhere I've seen it's usually on Thursday nights, which makes a lot of sense because it's encompassing, you're moving, you're breathing, you're gathering, there's all aspects to it. So that's really cool. And then there's also a lot of kirtan that happens on Thursday nights, which is involves a lot of your self moving and breath and sound and all of that. So that's really cool to see how it actually does match up.
Yeah, it does match up. And I think the people, we go through so many cycles of our life and so many different events. And when an event happens in our life, we have a sense, this intuitive sense of, I need emotional nurturing or I need spiritual nurturing. And that's why you're drawn to, you have a desire drawn to a certain class, because it's through that class that you're opening that aspect of yourself up. Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Cool.
Ah, so beautiful.
I'm very excited for the next part and talk about the moon cycles in addition to this, because we have the week, but then each week fits into a complete moon cycle. And then, how you can go through the moon cycle and open up all the aspects. You could do it in a week. I mean, you'd go to many yoga classes or whatever classes, but it might be better to spread it out over a month.
Yeah. Oh, well, cool. So, that webinar is going to be 2 weeks from today on the 16th of March. And so come back and join us for that one. We'll also post everything on the Good Elephant website too for you if you missed this. So thanks for doing this, Mom. It was so good to.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. It's been great.
All right, cool. Bye, everybody.
Bye.